Hi Sterling, Colorado, and everyone else out there. This is Michelle Mead and I'm in the Nostalgic Ceramics studio. I'm going to be doing a video for you today on making a cabin wax tart warmer out of stoneware. And so this is going to be a fun project for an adventurous beginner to intermediate. So it was a little bit difficult of a build, but if you have a few projects under your belt, you're good for this one. And it's so cute. Anyway, we are going to be having the workshop locally here in Sterling, Colorado on Friday, November 7th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. And that's Mountain Standard Time if you want to show up. Anyway, it's going to be a fun workshop, and let's go ahead and get right into it. Let's make this build. Okay, we're going to jump right into the materials we're going to need for this build, and then I'll get all this stuff off frame and we will jump right in. So you need a slab of clay, roughly, I'm not sure roughly what size this is. About a slab of clay, about 10 by 12, 13, 14, roughly 12 by 15. Slab of clay, roughly 12 by 15 for this project. This is a white or a buff stoneware with really fine sand or grog in it. That just helps us with the building process, especially if you're a beginner. So your stoneware doesn't have to be white. It can be whatever color you can come across. I fire to cone 6, so this is a mid-fire stoneware. I prefer white or buff for the glaze selections because this will be a workshop on November 7th for those who are local to Sterling, Colorado. And I want the people coming to the studio to be able to select any glaze they want and have that glaze come out really great on their piece. So that's why we go with the lighter clay in this case. You're going to need a wear board. I've got 2 templates here for this build. We're doing the cozy cabin, as I already mentioned. My first template is a 6-inch by 11-inch rectangle, and we will be using a 3-inch square cookie cutter for the base of this. And then the wax burner portion of the cozy cabin is a 4-inch by 10-inch rectangle, and we will be using a 2.5-inch square base or cookie cutter for the base of this. So you're gonna need those. I have a tea light candle here just so that I can make sure that my tea light is going to fit into my cabin, and then I'm going to be able to get my fingers in there and get my fingers out of there as I push this in and out. I want to make sure my opening is big enough for both my hands and the tea light. I've got a bucket of water with a sponge. I've got some slip, and then some other tools we'll be using. We've got the yellow rib for compression, a score tool. I've got an X-Acto knife because I want to cut out windows and doors in my cabin, so I'm going to use an X-Acto knife for that. A paintbrush for cleanup, a thumb tool, a needle tool, and I am missing my stylus, so here we go. And some sort of rubber stylus to clean up seams. And then of course we can't forget, you need a cup of coffee to get going and to, finish your project without pulling your hair out. No, just kidding. This is a little bit more of an intermediate build. If you're a very beginner, have never put your hands on clay before, I suggest you maybe start with something a little bit more simple than this. But if you're adventurous and you don't mind jumping right in and learning as you go, you could probably be successful with this. So there's all that. Let me pull all this stuff out of frame and we'll get started. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is use our rib to remove any texture from the slab roller. This also compresses the clay and prevents cracking. You need to go in multiple directions, vertical, horizontal, diagonal, and you need to do both sides of your slab. If you see an air bubble in your slab, which is pretty common, even with wedged clay can happen, just use your needle tool, poke those holes, poke those air bubbles, and then just compress them back out. Okay. So the next step is to go ahead and put any texture that you want in these in them. Mine is going to be specifically for the holidays, and so I kind of picked a roller that is you know, it's not super Christmassy, so I could like have it out probably from fall all the way through to, you know, February, March, really. But it does have holly on it, some pine cones, some birds, canaries maybe. And so I felt that that was very Christmassy and I could have that out for many seasons. So we're gonna roll that texture in. I'm gonna lift up on my slab to make sure it's not stuck to the table. And then to use these, we are not just using the rolling pin and going in this direction. We are actually going to press like this as we go. That gives us the best print possible. I'm gonna do one side and then move it over to the other and do the other side. The person who makes these rolling pins, let's see, I can't remember, this is sweetrollingpins.com. She's local to Colorado. I've spoken to her before. She's great. And she has so many different selections of rolling pins. So sweetrollingpins.com. And then we're gonna lift this up, make sure it's not stuck to the table again. All right, and another tool I forgot to mention in the beginning that I'm going to be using is this fettling knife here to cut out my pieces. We're gonna kind of lay this on here. We need to cut all of these out. So I'm just gonna lay them on here, make sure I've got enough room for everything. It's gonna be really close. We've got 2 cookie cutters here and here. I think it's going to be okay. I'm gonna move this down like that. And then I should be able to get this guy on here like that and scoot him back a little. And then this cookie cutter will fit there. So that slab was just about the perfect size for that. We'll go ahead and cut these out. I'm not mitering the joints on these because I've made them slightly bigger than the cookie cutter that I need, so that I can miter them after the fact, and I'll show you how to do that. So now we're just laying our template on here and we're cutting it out. There's no special way to cut this out in this particular instance. I do have other videos where I show you how to miter these join locations. If you want to go check those out, you can. Make sure any extra clay goes under plastic. Put that back in your plastic because you don't want it to dry out. You can use it again. So we've got 1 and 2. It doesn't have to be perfect. You do want it to be close though. So there's those. We've got 2 cookie cutters for our base. This is the main base, the larger of the 2. And then this is the internal base for the wax burner. So we got that. And we're gonna go ahead and get rid of all this excess, get it under plastic and covered so that you can use it again. If you have a bigger slab, you can use the little, if there's enough room. I didn't really have a whole lot of extra, but if you do, you can use what's left to make ornaments, just with cookie cutters. Okay, now I'm just gonna make sure these aren't stuck to the table. You can work directly on a wear board if you have a wear board large enough. I just kind of grabbed a small wear board today because my table is wood, and our local Mead Lumber donated everything, all the material we needed to build this table, which was really awesome of them. And it's wood, and so it's, you know, the clay can stick to it because I did poly it, but it doesn't stick nearly as bad as it would to plastic or anything else. So I can just usually build right on the table. And what I'm doing now is just smoothing out those edges so that there's no sharp edges. I'm gonna do that on both sides. I don't want any sharp edges on my piece. I mean, people really aren't gonna be touching these too much. It's not like you're gonna be using them in the kitchen or anything, but you will have to lift it up for, you know, to change your wax out, and, you know, if you pack it away, you know, if it's just a winter decoration. So you don't want it to be sharp anywhere. So I'm just pushing on those sharp edges just slightly. I'm not smashing anything. I'm just knocking off that 45-degree angle from the cut. So now we are, you know, rounded and smooth. Okay. So I'm gonna set these to the side on my wear board, and this one too. We're gonna start working with the bigger piece. Here, I'll clean that up so I don't get any texture. I don't want the texture from the table to get onto the surface of my piece. So I'm gonna smooth this out a little bit again, compress it a little bit again. Okay, so what we're going to do now is set this up, and we're gonna put it together as if we were making a mug. So we're not trying to get it super square right now. We're just putting it together as if we were gonna make a mug. Okay, we can bring this back and kind of measure to make sure that when we do start to square out, it's gonna square out on our base. Like I said, I did over correct this. So basically, you just want it to fit on there like this. We have these corners sticking out like about that much. And it ends up being about, I don't know, 1.5 inches of overlap right there. And I did that because I like the join the best when I cut it after the fact. I like the miter seam the best when I cut it this way after the fact. So I'm going at a diagonal, and I'm just cutting straight down between both slabs at the same time. And what will end up happening is you take this piece away, you take this piece away, put your extra under plastic, and you end up with a perfect join. Okay. And so now you're going to go ahead and slip and score that together. Got my score tool. The score tool in the studio that I give for the people who attend the workshops look a little bit different. It's like a hand tool with a rake, metal barbs on it. It looks like a tiny rake, basically. And that's also a different type of score tool, if you've seen those and know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, you can kind of see this has, you know, some barbs on it, or it was cut to kind of be a score tool. So, right, got my slip here. We're gonna put that on both seams. Okay, we're gonna seam that together. And I did overlap it slightly. I don't know if you can see that. See how there's a slight overlap there? That's so when I put my hand in here to push it together, I can kind of make sure it seals. And I'm just rolling my finger. I'm not smoothing, I'm not pressing, I'm just rolling my finger up and pressing at the same time. And there was a little bit of an overlap there, like I said, and so it ends up making that join real nice. You can go in there with your thumb tool and smooth out the seam on the inside. Okay. I'm not going to worry about this bump up right here because we're actually going to be cutting a portion of this off later on. I am going to take a sponge and just kind of wipe off this excess slip I've got on the front here, but this sponge is incredibly dry. Like I can squeeze as hard as I can and like hardly anything comes out. Like it's a very dry sponge. I'm not trying to add more moisture. I'm trying to take the moisture that's on there away. Okay. All right, so then from here, we can bring back our wear board. We're gonna put our larger of the two squares, the 3-inch square on there. I'm gonna go ahead and compress that out and smooth that out again. I'm gonna set this on here. I'm gonna eyeball center as best I can. I do that by looking at the interior, not the exterior. Okay. And that looks pretty good to me. Okay. And so we're gonna turn this circle into a square. And the way that I like to do that is by using this needle tool. And so basically what I'm gonna do is, let's see if I can do it towards you so you can see what I'm doing. I'm gonna, on the inside, push the clay to that corner, pull the needle tool straight, and kind of use it as a guide to square off that rounded corner. So there's one. I'm gonna go to the next one, push that out into the corner, put my needle tool straight, then use it as a guide to square off that corner. And that actually happened to be right where my seam was. So when you're doing this, you may want to consider making sure that your seam is in the middle somewhere instead of right there at the corner. I'm gonna push, put my needle tool straight up and down, and pinch to square off that corner. Okay. And the last one, push, oops, it's kind of stuck to the base there. There we go. I'm gonna push to the corner, put my needle tool straight up and down, and kind of pinch that corner off. Okay. So now we've got this wonky looking thing, and what you can start to do is push the insides, like at the base here, where it's still round, you can push those flat, and do it at the top too. Right? We're taking a round form and altering it to be something square. Okay? All right. So once we're there, we're gonna gently peel this off. You can see the marks where I was pushing the wall out towards the corner. If you have a directional, pattern, you're gonna wanna make sure that you attach so that your pattern is right side up, okay? So, and that happens to be this side for me. So I'm going to score. I'm going to score the base. We're going to go ahead and put our slip on. Both pieces. And attach that on there. Okay, the best way to do this is to tamp it down. We're not pounding it down, we're just slightly smooshing it down. You don't want to like distort or ruin your pot. You're just making sure that that's seated on there real well. Okay. And right now I'm just kind of refining the shape a little, and I like that. I think it's adorable. What I'm going to do next is kind of maybe the more difficult parts of this build. I'm going to cut this form to look like a house. I'm going to cut this here and here, and then I'm going to cut it off here, and then I'm going to try and match that same visual on the other side. And basically the way that I'm going to go about that is to start by marking the middle of my piece. And so you can do that by just kind of like putting your needle tool over the top of your piece there, eyeballing center, creating a mark. You're going to go to the other side, do the same thing, create a mark. That's your center. Then from here, you can go down and draw a line to however you want that the top of your house to be, right? What do they call that? I lost my mind. Like the eave of the house, or like, you know, the angle of the roof, right there. Okay. I'm also going to do a line straight up and down right here, because what I can do then, I can't really cut this away from me. So, but basically those lines I just made, I'm going to cut them out. I'm going to cut here. I'm going to cut straight up and down with the other mark I made. You're going to end up with this piece of clay right here. We've got this piece of clay that fit right in here, right? What we're going to do is reverse it. We're going to reverse it and set it up against here like this. Okay? We're going to make the other mark. I learned this from my grandfather. He was a woodworker. This is how he made sure that his basketball backboards were the same on both sides. He would cut his piece of wood out, flip it, and do the other side. Okay? So now we're gonna cut this out. We're gonna save this piece because this is gonna be the same piece we use all the way around. So we're gonna cut this out here and cut this out here. Okay? And what we have is, you know, it's not perfect, but it's it's pretty dang close. Here, can you see that? Put it here, okay? So now I'm gonna take this piece, that same original piece I cut, and I'm gonna move to the other side and do the same thing. I'm gonna draw that line here and draw the line here. We're gonna cut that out. Okay. Use my original piece again, flip it, line it up again, draw my lines here and here. Cut that, cut that. And you have this, you know, shape that is not noticeably different for the eyeball. It's pretty close, okay? Then from here, we're gonna cut this off. And again, you can just eyeball this, make a line, make sure it looks good before you commit to the cut, okay? And then once you feel like you've got it, you can cut it off, okay? There's two. And last but not least, we're gonna do it again here. Draw the line first before you commit. There we go. Okay, so we have our little cabin shape. So how does this cabin become a wax burner? Well, we're gonna set another smaller square inside of here. We're gonna make another box and we're gonna invert it inside here, okay? And then from there, you can kind of decide, how you want to cut out your door and your windows, because you're gonna wanna do that last, because you're not gonna wanna cut a piece out where your wax tart melt area is. Okay, so we're gonna set this off to the side. I am gonna clean up these areas right here real quick, because this is gonna start to dry out a little. And if you have like points right there that are kind of cracked or that you cut through, you're just gonna wanna compress them back together before it gets too leather hard. So I'm gonna do that real quick. And I'm talking about these corners here where we cut, you know, my knife went through a little bit, and I just want those to not crack. And so I'm going to come back in and compress them. Okay. Okay, and we can do some more cleanup later once it's a little bit more firm and set. So we're gonna set, well here, I need my wear board. So we're gonna set this off to the side. And now we're gonna pick up this and we're gonna do the same thing again with this next piece. Put your scrap under plastic unless you're making an ornament out of it. Get yourself a drink of coffee. All right. And I'm gonna compress that. These walls are gonna be quite a bit taller than we need them to be. We're gonna be cutting quite a bit off. That's okay. I figured it would be easier to manage if we did that. So, and I'll explain what I mean once we get there. So we're just gonna basically do the same thing we just did. We're gonna put this into a round. Make sure that the fit is going to fit on there the way we want to. And this time the overlap for a correct fit is probably closer to 2 inches. Like a 2-inch overlap here. Okay. And I'm gonna go at a diagonal like this. Cut all straight down through both pieces. Okay? That's kind of hard to do away from you backwards. Unless you're making an ornament, take your scrap, put it under plastic. In a studio like mine, there's so much reclaim. There's so much clay reclaim. And anytime you can save moist clay without reclaiming it, it's a good thing for your studio, for your studio leader. Okay. So now we're gonna slip and score again, just like we did before. We're gonna slip those score lines. Same thing again. We're gonna put it together with a slight overlap. See that overlap? See how that's lined up? We're not putting the miter exactly together like this. The miter isn't going together exactly like this. We've got an overlap happening. Okay? See that? Then you're gonna go in and pinch it together. If you can't get your finger in there, that's what the thumb tool is for. Okay. Pinch that together. And then take your thumb tool, seal the seam on the inside, smooth it out. Okay. Again, we're going to be cutting quite a bit of this off, so we're not too concerned about this hump at the top. But if you were making a mug or something and you didn't like this little jump that happens there, which is quite commonly happens with hand builds, you can just take your fettling knife, cut it off. Okay. Again, that's not necessary for this build because we're going to be cutting most of this away anyway. Grab your square, eyeball round. Again, for me, that I do that from the inside, looking down this way, not from the outside. Okay, and then we have what's pretty close on that square centered. And again, same thing. I'm taking my needle tool, I'm pushing that clay to the corner, pushing it straight up and down, pinching a corner. Okay. Once again, my texture is upside down. So right where my birds, their heads are on bottom, see? So mine actually goes here. You might want to pay attention to that if you feel like, you know, your square is off on the top versus the bottom. I mean, mine really isn't, but you could check that ahead of time if you're concerned that it's not going to be the same from top to bottom. Okay. All right. So now we've got our second box. We're going to slip and score that on. Now, the bottom part of this piece needs to be cleaned up really, really well before we even move on to the next step, because you're not going to be able to clean it up after it's seated inside of your cabin. That makes sense. So I'm going to clean up this base at this point, and basically all I'm doing is going around this seam with my thumb tool. I'm using this side of it. I'm pushing that base up onto the wall all the way around. And here we have the portion of our cabin that is going to hold the wax. On the inside, again, you're gonna wanna clean that up, because if you can imagine, if you have like jagged edges in there, the wax is gonna seep into those crevices and it's gonna be hard to clean out. So you are gonna wanna spend a little bit of time just kind of smoothing the interior of this as much as you can. You're also gonna wanna seal that seam at the base, and you can do that either using a wrung out paintbrush. You don't want a ton of water on this. You can use a stylus tool. This actually isn't my favorite stylus tool. Here, I like this one more. I got these on Amazon. I got them in a pack of like, I don't know, there was a bunch in it. Anyway, it has this flat end on this side, a more tapered end on this side, and these silicone pieces come off, so you can use it as a different type of tool if you want to. Anyway, I really like these. The only downfall is that they could be a little bit longer, but I'm just gonna go in there and seal that seam with the tapered end. Make sure that the wax can't seep through into any cracks on the inside there. And then I'm going to take my wrung out paintbrush and clean it up even further. Okay, again, you don't want any rough or jagged or, you know, areas in here that wax can kind of seep into and make it difficult for you to get your wax out when you want to change scents. Okay, so there's that, right? Pretty square. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's handmade. You want it to be handmade because that's what we're doing. And basically what's going to happen is this is going to fit inside of here, right? Hopefully. And we're going to, we're not pushing this all the way down in there. Okay, we're just getting it in there far enough to hold wax, like a wax tart. And then we're gonna cut, we're gonna slip and score it on, and we're gonna cut the same shape out, okay? And really all you want to do is make sure that it's in there deep enough. And so how I'm gonna determine that is I'm gonna go through, and with my needle tool, I'm gonna trace out where this is landing at the top. Okay. Okay, and then I'm gonna gently pull this out. And we're gonna see here, you can see where my line was. We are only in there, probably not far enough for the wax that we want. We probably want to get in there, you know, at least to here. And maybe we should make that mark on here now. Like we're gonna wanna like have enough in there, right? And also, if you're doing this at home, because this is a really tight fit, but if you're doing it at home, maybe you can go down to a 2-inch square instead of a 2.5 inch. And I'm going to stretch this clay. And when we do it in the workshop, we're probably going to make that correction, just so it's easier for people. Now we want it to go down to this mark here, so I'm gonna kind of put that there because that's my like determining marker. And it's gonna go down to there. Okay, that's exactly what we want, right there. Okay. So I'm gonna trace that out again. That's where we're at. Okay. That's where we want to be. So I'm going to pull this out again. And that's going to tell me where I need to slip and score. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Last but not least, I'm going to put that in there, and we're going to push that all together. Okay. If you can't reach all the way down in there, again, you can use your thumb tool. Make sure those pieces are real nice and snug together. Okay. All right, that's great. Now, this is also giving the roof area of our cabin a little bit of extra strength and stability. So now all that's left to do is to go through and cut off all this excess, and you can just follow the line that you've already made and just go around and cut that excess off. Okay. Make sure all that's pushed together still. Okay, and what you end up with is this right here. Right? A little spot, a little seat in there, or you can fit maybe 1 or 2 wax tarts. I've made my mark here. You probably can't see it, but I did make my mark here about where that line ended, is right about there. So if I want a window, it's gonna have to be down here, or I could do a window up here, but light probably isn't gonna shine through it. In the front, you can make a door. In the back, you're gonna make a cutout that you're gonna be able to fit your tea light in. And so before I even do that though, I do kind of wanna go through and clean some of this up a little. You can see my base here it's seated on there, but I've got some excess corner here that I wanna get off of there. And I'm just using my needle tool to take off these extra bits of clay right here. And I'm just using my needle tool to trace, you know, along the edge there to take those sharp corners off. I'll take this, and just like I did before on the other one, I am just going to seal that at the base there, clean it up. This build you know, probably is an intermediate more than a beginner, but I mean, I guess if you're adventurous, I mean, honestly, me as a beginner, I would have I wouldn't have let that slow me down if I had ever done a build like before with clay or not. I would have just done the workshop, and even if I had no skills. But I also I also am the type of individual that if I fail at it, I view that as a learning experience, not as a failure of my person. And so for me, I would take the workshop anyway, and then if I failed, I'd be like, okay, well, what can I do next time? And, you know, what did I learn and what can I take away from it? So if you're like one of those types of individuals that doesn't mind doing something a little bit beyond your skill level, and you're okay with how it turns out regardless of you know, regardless of what your skill set is, then I would say, yeah, go for it. You know, if you want to learn how to do clay, you want to do a fun project that is a little bit more advanced, you want to learn something different and new, even if you're not great at it from the very start, you know, you could totally do this. If you're one of those people that gets really mad at yourself if you're not, you know, great at something right away, and if you fail, you take it personally as like a failure of your person versus just I'm learning, then maybe you might want to do a different type of workshop before you try this one. Okay? Does that make sense? Everybody following? So now comes the fun part. Now is the part where we get to kind of, you know, do a cutout. I feel like you could cut out a window here, and I probably will, and even a window on the other side. It's just that light isn't really going to shine through it because we're blocking the light here. Have to decide what side is the front and what side is the back, and since my seam is right here, I'm going to call this the back side. And I've got my mark here where at the corner, I've got my mark here where the base ends on the inside there. And I'm just basically gonna cut out this entire back side so I can fit a tea light and my finger in there. And again, I'm just gonna eyeball that. I'm gonna go under my mark I made, go straight across, go straight down, straight down. Okay. Cut that out. We end up with this right here. I'm going to clean up those corners because they will crack. I'm actually going to go ahead and cut all the way to the base here too. Cut that little bit extra off. And again, I'm compressing these corners right here because when you do that, this is the area right here that tends to want to crack. That's the stress point. So I'm going to make sure I compress that stress point right here really, really well. Okay, this is another stress point, but not as big as this one at the base here because this is holding up all the weight. All right, so you really want to compress that clay right there. Okay, we're gonna get that corner too. I'm just compressing with my needle tool in those corners, just kind of going around. Very good. And then now comes the fun part, and I have these little cookie cutters. You don't have to use these, but I have these little cookie cutters. Little square ones. I don't have a rectangular one, so that's not going to be great for the door, but this would be good for a window. And again, my mark is like right here, so I could put a window here, and I'm just gonna leave a mark with the square with the cookie cutter. I'm not poking through yet, I'm just leaving a mark. And then I'm gonna put my door right here. So you can use your X-Acto knife or a fettling knife if you have a really sharp fettling knife. If you don't, the X-Acto knife works really good because it's super thin. So I'm gonna cut out my window. Okay. If you want to get real technical, you can try and, you know, leave the little, you know, cross sections in there. I'm not going to do that, and I'm going to do my door on the other side, and I'm going to keep my door piece because I'm going to open my door. And if you've done a toad hut with me, you know what I'm talking about. We cut the door out, right? And I'm gonna keep this little piece because that's gonna become my door right here for my cabin. I'm gonna put a little doorknob on it, okay? You can put windows on the sides here too if you want. You know, it's kind of a luminary, so you know, wherever you can get cutouts. Also, you want to think about, you need enough cutouts for your candle to get the oxygen it needs. I've done that before where I've made a luminary and there weren't enough cutouts for the candle to get the oxygen it needed. So just make sure that fits in there real well, and it does, and it's super cute. Okay, it's absolutely gonna melt that wax that you put in the top here. Okay, let's see. I think I am gonna put a window in up here. And I think I am going to do the cross section, and I'm gonna mark it with a round cookie cutter first before I start cutting it out. And that's like a little window into the wax. Although I am a little sad because it's cutting off the head of my bird. But, oh well, we're gonna roll with it. So I'm going to mark where my little cross sections are going to be before I commit. Okay. This is like almost as bad, if not worse, than carving a pumpkin, to give you a point of reference. Yeah, I'm feeling like, oh my God, the cross section's gonna break. And like, you know, like that feeling you get when you're like trying to do a detail you shouldn't be on a pumpkin. That's how I felt about this window. So there's your forewarning on that. But it is cute. So, and that's like, you know, you'll get to see through there into the wax. So I guess that's pretty cute. Let me go ahead and clean up the stress points, which are the corners, always the corners. I do like the door because I cut into the bird, and because I decided to go ahead and I opted to go ahead and line it up, you can still see the bird on the door. So I guess I like that. And since the door isn't so big, it's not so heavy that it's gonna fall down, I don't think. If the door was any bigger, it might. So if you keep your door small, you can get away with it, I guess is what I'm saying. And go ahead, see on the inside there where we've got this mess from the slip. I'm gonna go ahead and compress that together and smooth it out so we don't get any cracking there. Okay. And all that's left from here really is to go ahead and clean everything up, smooth it out. I'm gonna get in on the inside here where now I can reach in there to seal my base with the stylus tool. So I'm gonna seal all those edges in there. This is a super cute project. It is a little bit more intermediate than beginner. Really a little bit more intermediate than beginner. But, oh my gosh, that's adorable. All right, so all that's left now is cleanup of your area, cleanup of your tools, cleanup of your project. Dry this out slowly. Definitely because of those stress areas we discussed at the corners, those are prone to cracking, so you're gonna wanna dry this out slowly. In my studio here in Colorado, we don't have a whole lot of moisture in our air, and so that process can go pretty quickly. It is fall, and so it's getting a little colder outside, which is taking it a little bit longer for things to dry out, which is a benefit for a project like this. So I would say, you know, if you dried this under plastic slowly for about a week, you should be good. You can fire it and then glaze it however you want to glaze it for the holidays, for winter time. I mean, I'm definitely putting pine in this. I don't know about you, but pine scent is going in this, and I'm excited for it. So anyway, without further ado, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're local, we will be having this workshop on Friday, November 7th from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. We might run a little bit later if we're struggling. Again, this is not a project that I would recommend for somebody who's never put their hands on clay before, unless you are willing to risk it turning out, you know, less than perfect. If you're willing to risk that, you're willing to, like, you know, just go with the flow, just do the best you can, just learn what you can, then yeah, absolutely, as a beginner, you know, go for it. If you get really, really hurt when you can't do something perfect the first time, this probably isn't the project for you. And with that said, I welcome everyone. This probably isn't good for kids unless, you know, you want to bring your kid and do it with them. I can understand that, and you can give that an attempt if you want. But pretty much I would say that this is for adults who are adventurous beginners to intermediate. They've built a few things, have a few things under their belt. And oh, thank you for voting. Everybody locally who voted on this workshop, you all are awesome. I super appreciate everyone's votes. This was the definite winner of everyone's votes, so I hope you all come and attend the workshop. Yeah, how cute is that? All right, well, thank you, Sterling, Colorado, for all of your support and kindness, and just great community here. Everyone else out in the world, I hope you make this project and enjoy it, and I will see you all in the next video.